that accounts for its absence from today's sitting. Statement by ministers.
Do you have copies been provided? Okay, great. They'll be circulated now or distributed. Mr. President, I am always pleased to provide the Senate with an update on the different aspects of work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And today in particular, I would like to speak about Jamaica's participation in both the meeting of women foreign ministers held in Toronto, Canada, and the high-level week of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly in New York over the period of the 18th to the 28th of September 2024. Mr. President, there is no doubt, of course, that senators appreciate the value of perspectives which women leaders bring nationally and globally. And I'm therefore pleased to report on a recent meeting of women foreign ministers on the 18th and 19th of September, which I was honored to co-chair with my colleague, the Honorable Melanie Joly, Foreign Minister of Canada. With the participation of 16 of the 34 women foreign ministers who currently now exist in the world or hold positions in the role. The forum allowed us to engage in targeted discussions on issues affecting women's roles in political leadership and governance, as well as the impact of disinformation, especially in digital spaces. I shared some perspectives from Jamaica, including efforts to strengthen women's political participation with the establishment of our first women's parliamentary bicameral caucus, in keeping with the tenets of the National Policy for Gender Equality and our Vision 2030. The core presentation for discussion, however, was made virtually by Jamaica's Dr. Nadine Spence, academic and advocate, who participated in the meeting as a civil society representative, speaking on challenges and opportunities for women's participation in politics and public life. And I just want to share that the participation was quite diverse. We had women foreign ministers from Eswatini and Malawi and Ghana. We had from Latvia and Slovenia. We had from Nepal and Indonesia. We had, of course, from the Americas, Minister Joly and myself from the Caribbean. So the perspectives were quite diverse and really surrounded two broad perspectives where some countries, having achieved a particular level of representation of women in political leadership, are now fearing retrenchment and pushback from the right, I suppose, is how they would define it in their spaces, while countries like Jamaica and Malawi are in a stage where we are still seeking, and Nepal, still seeking to increase and improve the number of women in political leadership while advancement is taking place at other levels. So we're often dealing with the same issues from different perspectives, and gathering to discuss our roles was actually quite productive and informative. Prior to the commencement of the Women Foreign Ministers engagement, Minister Joly and I also met with a wide cross-section of civil society representatives who shared their experiences and perspectives on matters ranging from the status of women in Afghanistan, gender-based violence in conflict zones, including safety of female journalists, the wider concept of women, peace and security, women minorities, and women in promotion of film. So a very wide perspective, wide spectrum of perspectives were present for discussion. A significant outcome of the meeting was the adoption of a joint co-chair statement which urges greater action by the international community on women's issues as we approach the 30th anniversary of the Beijing platform, which takes place next year. And the statement calls for gender parity in the international system, including within the UN. So we specifically noted the fact that there have only been 4 presidents of the General Assembly who are women in the 79 presidents of General Assembly. There have only been 4 women. And there has, of course, never been a female Secretary General. So we actively call for a female Secretary General, for candidates to be put forward who are women, And that is also for the Security Council, which makes recommendations for consideration to also consider seriously female candidates for the next Secretary General when that vote comes forward. The visit also allowed for bilateral meetings with Foreign Minister Jolie and with the Honorable Ahmed Hussein, who is the Minister of International Cooperation of Canada, and the former Minister of Immigration. And we were able to have discussions across the piece on those. The encounters were a continuation of our joint efforts to strengthen cooperation in trade and investment, security and immigration, including labor mobility. We are having some issues with changing rules in respect of international students that have sometimes caused difficulties for persons who move in one context and have the rules change and their families are caught in between regulatory regimes. And we're trying to work with them on how to smooth those transitions out, as well as issues with wanting to expand our seasonal workers programs, but ensuring that the workers programs themselves have sufficient oversight to ensure that they are being managed in a way that ensure our workers have dignified and safe circumstances in which to ply their trade. Discussions also were held on Canada's support for Caribbean countries hit by Hurricane Beryl. Canada had stepped forward very early, indirectly initially through Red Cross and Food for the Poor, but also strong bilateral cooperation, and in those meetings we discussed ways in which those could be enhanced. The situation in Haiti, on which we cooperate, and the MSS mission in particular, were also issues of shared interest in our discussions. Mr. President, I also have made it a point of duty to engage with Jamaicans and Friends of Jamaica wherever government business may take me. So not only did I have a meeting with Minister Jolie and leading members of the Jamaican community well, it wasn't in the margins of the Women's Foreign Ministers meeting, but it was while I was there. But also on landing, I did participate in a town hall meeting, a broad town hall meeting in Toronto on the 18th. Gave an update on the outcomes of the 10th Jamaica Biennial Diaspora Conference held in June, as well as, of course, several areas in which we are making progress in Jamaica, and took questions from members of the community who wanted to ask about investment opportunities, public facilities, mental health programs, and a broad range of concerns and suggestions which they have in respect of the country that they love so well. I especially recognize and highlighted, of course, their invaluable contribution and the support of the Jamaican community to nation building in both Canada, their chosen home, and Jamaica. And just to share one small anecdote, it's not here, but just to show the kind of presence that Jamaica has. We're not the largest diaspora population that's present in Toronto, but we're a significant one. And we not only have 4 serving chancellors at major universities. We have had 5, but we have 4 serving now. But we have young people who have won their Black and Minorities Entrepreneurship Award. We had 3 Jamaican women shortlisted, and the Jamaican one, of course. And we also had a young gentleman who developed this entire concept of an academy, a virtual academy that taps into young people's desire for bling and floss. It's called the Flip and Floss Academy, where they earn credits to buy brand name items based on their attendance and participation, creation of ideas, with a forced saving element, because his view is, of course, to create a mechanism by which young people leave university without debt. And I am like, okay, this is a great program, and when are you coming back with it? So, of course, we're engaging with him, and the connections will be made with you as well. He has engaged with the Prime Minister informally through the Diaspora Conference mechanism, and we look forward to, again, harnessing more of the power of our diaspora, which is broad and varied and wonderful in its multi-layered capacities. This takes me to the to UNGA 79 and the Summit of the Future, Mr. President, the practice of multilateral diplomacy is a critical pillar of the work of this ministry. And with the UN at the center of multilateralism, our participation is consistent, it's constant, but the annual high-level week is one which bears special attention. So I'm pleased to report on our participation in that regard, held from the 20th to the 28th. I have here 27th. That was the date on which I presented the national policy statement. But that's the period. The high-level week brings together, Mr. President, heads of state and government to address critical matters in relation to global governance and international cooperation and development. Jamaica's delegation was led by Prime Minister Dr. the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, and I had the privilege of participating in the many critical engagements on the UN agenda, as well as within the margins of the high-level segment alongside the Prime Minister. The delegation also included senior officials from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and from the Planning Institute of Jamaica. If I can address the Summit of the Future events, which started the UN High-Level Week. This forged a new international consensus on how we as a global community make decisions today that deliver a better present and safeguard a sustainable and prosperous legacy for generations yet unborn. Jamaica played an active role in the negotiations of the outcome for the Summit of the Future, which is called the Pact for the Future. The Pact includes two annexes, the Global Digital Compact and the Declaration on Future Generations. And I encourage, especially young people who may be listening to, who are interested in these matters, who maybe are studying international relations, to access these documents online and have a look at where the thinking is going in terms of renewing a belief in and a commitment to multilateralism that is forward-looking and going beyond, exercising greater foresight than perhaps is now exercised. Jamaica, together with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, served as co-facilitator for the Declaration on Future Generations. And some of you may have noted that we actually had a young people's consultation here in partnership with the UN, where we brought in young people from the tertiary institutions, the secondary, their representative groups, as well as NGOs that are youth-based, to have a discussion with them on their views around the Declaration on Future Generations and their thinking of what they would want to see in such a document or in its implementation domestically. So this is an exercise which we have encouraged other countries to undertake as well, to make sure they're having direct impact and direct input from the young people. The declaration was received with much enthusiasm, and we received numerous expressions of gratitude and commendations for our work because of the extent to which consensus was obtained. And so we express great appreciation to the team at the permanent mission of Jamaica at the UN, led by His Excellency Brian Wallace, and our small team there, very effective, very well respected. And the declaration's consensus is one more demonstration of their effectiveness. Given Jamaica's co-facilitator role, Mr. President, the Prime Minister co-chaired, participated in, and delivered remarks at several events relating to the declaration. And the summit itself was preceded by action days, which focused on multi-stakeholder partnerships to support a more inclusive, effective, and networked multilateral system. Prime Minister Holness highlighted the importance of effective implementation of the outcomes of the summit, asserting that this effort will require governments to effectively collaborate and include futures thinking. And yes, that's correct, it's not a typo. There's a new narrative or new language that's being built around how we consider the futures that are possible and lie ahead based on how it is that we determine policy at this time, and that we do so in all decision-making across national and local government. In that context, he noted that the Jamaican government has already begun to invest in anticipatory planning and future-proofing, recognizing first and foremost, of course, that a solid macroeconomic foundation is the most basic requirement for sustainable progress. Prime Minister also participated in the opening of the interactive panel on Sustainable Futures for All, an event hosted alongside Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, UN Deputy Secretary General, and charged with the Sustainable Development Agenda. Among other issues, Prime Minister highlighted that the government has reduced debt from 147, debt to GDP ratio from 147% to 72% in order to achieve our vision of a sustainable Jamaican future in which unborn generations will not be burdened by debt. So the aim is to think of debt not only conceptually now, but to think of it in terms of the impact on future generations and to make policy in that regard as well. So it's a perspective that has been very much widely welcomed, although it may seem obvious to some in the context of these discussions. It was actually a new perspective for many. That event also reaffirmed the importance of establishing new norms, including the use of measures and indicators beyond GDP, to better assess the needs and meet the aspirations of women and girls, young people, vulnerable groups in relation to sustainable development. And that, I'm sure colleagues realize or recognize that that is a reference to the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, which has now been approved by the UN General Assembly and is now being recommended. Jamaica is actually advocating actively for it to be used by international financial institutions and bilateral partners in assessing their issuance of grant funding and concessionary financing. Mr. President, in delivering Jamaica's national statement at the Summit of the Future, the Prime Minister noted that the summit and the pact embody renewed hope for advancing a common vision on leveraging multilateralism to create a dynamic framework in which our future generations will thrive. And to this end, he asserted that we must address the glaring SDG financing gap amounting to 2.5 to 4 trillion United States dollars annually, meaning that globally, for countries to achieve the SDGs, it is anticipated that 2.5 to 4 million US dollars more is needed globally, annually, in order to get countries to where they need to be, especially post-COVID, to get back on the Agenda 2030 track. So I know that persons here had looked at PIOJ or announcement that Jamaica wouldn't attain its Agenda 2030 goals in 2030, but this is a global recognition that all countries are off track, and in fact, most countries are, or Jamaica is better on track than most countries because we are closer to, I think it's above 60% are on track or have not gotten worse, while globally the average is 17%, and Jamaica is at 60. So we're not only a leader in the Caribbean on this regard, we're a global leader, and for this reason, Prime Minister, yes, thank you for recognizing that. Our mechanisms used by PIOJ as well as the government at large are being reviewed by other countries and by international organizations. And of course, the Secretary General, this was one of the reasons the Secretary General invited Prime Minister to co-chair the SDG Stimulus Leaders Group, which is heads of 12 countries that are being charged with advocating for methods and financing to get SDG and the Agenda 2030 back on track, the goals back on track. So again, you know, people who want to think poorly of their country really have a stack of evidence that does not support any reason to do so. There's really a lot going on that is good, and it is recognized internationally, and we should celebrate that and own it. So we're, again, on the SDG track. This is important for us, and I will just make the note for Hansard, although I'm sure senators are all well aware, that our Agenda 2030 is 98% aligned with the UN Agenda 2030. So how we work towards one takes us towards the other, and this is another model that actually is looked at very positively by other countries in the world. So just to also continue that, Prime Minister also called for the world rather, to redouble efforts to address global poverty, income inequality, and food insecurity, to take the steps necessary to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to deliver a future that fosters peaceful societies and achieves debt sustainability, resilience to climate shocks, infrastructural development, high-quality health and education systems, full respect for human rights and the empowerment of women and girls, and an enabling environment that makes international trade and the economy work for sustainable development. So holistic approach to every aspect of sustainable development. On the matter of multilateral reform, Mr. President, I'll just mention briefly that he asserted that such processes are necessary. So reform is necessary. And in particular, that the Security Council does need to become more representative, inclusive, and effective in a changing global security landscape, and that global governance generally needs to be more equitable, just, and inclusive. Mr. President, just to mention a few other events during high-level week that Prime Minister participated in. They associated not only with the Summit of the Future, but beyond. So the SDG Lounge event on climate financing and financing for development, where he spoke on unleashing finance and early warnings for all. The EOSIS leaders meeting, and that's the Association of Small Island States, and it includes all the small islands, Africa and Pacific, Caribbean, in which our participation this year was particularly important and poignant given the impact of Beryl on Jamaica and other members of CARICOM. And as we head into COP29 later this year, we also renewed our advocacy for tangible steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to support climate financing for developing countries, and in particular SIDS. The high-level moment to honor the victims of slavery, recalling that in 2015, Jamaica played a lead role in the establishment of the permanent memorial to honor the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade at the UN headquarters. It's known as the Ark of Return. Prime Minister Holness participated in the ceremony held at the Ark, and he affirmed Jamaica's unwavering commitment to the pursuit of reparatory justice, as well as the proclamation of the second international decade for people of African descent. And within CARICOM, we have been welcoming that there are several African countries that previously have been very resistant to a discussion on reparations. They have been closed to it and we have not always seen eye to eye multilaterally on taking the issue forward. But they have, there's a shift taking place. Several of them have changed perspective, and some of them are on their way. And this is leading to a greater energy and a greater consensus towards some of the actions that can be taken. And certainly the proclamation of the second international decade for people of African descent is creating a framework for our continuation along that path to reparatory justice as recognized within the multilateral system and bilaterally as required. The Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States had a joint summit of the Troika and the heads of state of government. This is the incoming and outgoing heads of government, as well as the members of the Bureau. So Prime Minister expressed support for the appointment of a champion to mobilize financial resources for the body, and this will be the President of Botswana. He also thanked members of the OACPS for their solidarity and support of Haiti, and in particular Kenya, which is leading the MSS mission. I mentioned briefly, Mr. President, the Diaspora Town Hall meeting. Again, Prime Minister always seeks to meet with the diaspora when he travels, and we try to move around as much as possible. The last one was Queens, this one was in the Bronx, and it was an inclusive and productive town hall meeting where Prime Minister highlighted development priorities and investment initiatives in Jamaica to improve infrastructure, generate economic growth, and better address social issues. And he also shared a historical perspective on economic development and engaged on the importance of the community and its opportunities for greater participation in national development. The diaspora was also sensitized to the new approach and system to provide improved consular service at the Jamaican consulate in New York. And I just want to use this opportunity to again speak about the innovation that's being pursued. Last year at the consulate in Jamaica, Consulate of Jamaica in New York. Last year, we at the consulate in New York received 2,200,000 plus calls. No matter how we improve our phone systems, which we have, and it has reduced complaints, but no matter how we improve our systems, we can never staff up to manage 2.2 million calls per year. It is impossible. So Consul General has been very innovative and has we proposed an AI tool to address our calls. And what we are now doing is training our AI bot. So it's a closed system. It's not a system that taps into ChatGPT or any of these broad spaces where people can access data. It's a private system, and one in which our AI bot is being taught the answers to questions about documentation that you need for visas, that you need for passports, where you can go to in Jamaica in different spaces, how you can contribute to different things, the questions that we regularly get that take extensive time. Recognizing that we unfortunately don't have a large reading population. So directing people to the information on the website, which is an improvement and has helped, but directing people to information on the website is not enough for our population overseas. They want to hear. And therefore, this bot, his name is Jacob for the moment, as we're testing, you can ask him, what do I need to get a visa? And what this will do is take calls off of the system that take up staff time, that reduce our ability to respond to calls. So it will help with customer service, help with customer satisfaction, and it will also use technology positively and demonstrate how it is that innovation and technology can continue to deliver if you are thoughtful and about how secure you are and how you can use it to help to solve practical problems which you have. So I'm very excited about it. If you can't add date now, I'm sure you've heard me speak about 5 times now. But it is really one of these things that can be a game changer. So as soon as he's fully launched, I will be inviting you all to call and test, but not to cause a rush on the system, of course. Mr. President, Jamaica deeply values our relationship with our bilateral and regional and multilateral partners. So Prime Minister welcomed the opportunity for bilateral encounters with his counterparts from Ghana, Haiti, Kenya, and the Kingdom of Lesotho. The Prime Minister conveyed Jamaica's continued solidarity to Prime Minister Kony of Haiti as efforts are made to restore peace, stability, and democracy. In respect of the discussions with President Ruto of Kenya, they included focus also on the pivotal role that Kenya is playing in the multinational security support mission, and they also spoke about wider multilateral issues. Discussions with Ghana and the Kingdom of Lesotho addressed the desire for closer collaboration with CARICOM and with the Commonwealth. And the President, the Prime Minister also met with the UN Secretary General to discuss issues not only relating to Haiti, but the attainment of the SDGs, especially for SIDS, what Jamaica is doing differently, taking account of SDG financing and the role Jamaica plays in co-chairing the Friends of the SDGs and financing for the SDGs within the context of the UN. And that has been recognized as critical leading into the new Financing for Development conference, which is scheduled to be hosted by Spain next year. So Jamaica's role again will feed into that. Reform of international financial institutions, climate financing, and the collaborative initiatives of the SDG Stimulus Leaders Group. So both leaders engaged specifically on the MSS mission to Haiti, and in particular about how to get greater funding into the trust fund. Prime Minister was also pleased to have been paid courtesy calls by Mr. Strive Masiyiwa, the African businessman and philanthropist who was instrumental as a special envoy and funding facilitator within the African, or by the African Union, when it provided COVID-19 vaccines to Jamaica and other CARICOM countries during the pandemic, as well as Tony Elumelu, well-known of United Bank of Africa, well-known business player on the continent and beyond. And they discussed increasing trade and investment between Africa and CARICOM, promotion of investment in Jamaica, of course, and the empowerment of developing countries' populations through digitization. Mr. President, as the Prime Minister was unable to remain in New York for the full program events during High Level Week, I had the privilege of leading Jamaica's delegation until its conclusion. And my engagements included, and you'll be happy to know I won't be providing summaries for all, but I'm happy to take questions. I've just listed them. The 17th Ministerial Meeting of the Global Governance Group, and I'll just share briefly that that is chaired by Singapore and includes always the incoming, outgoing, and current presidents of the G20. at the foreign ministers level. So there's an opportunity for a select group of foreign ministers to engage with the foreign ministers that are leading the G20, presidency or are about to, on different issues on the developmental agenda. The high-level event on sea level rise, the Ocean Panels Leaders Meeting, the second G20 Foreign Ministers Meeting under Brazil's presidency, a historic meeting, never been held in the context of the UN before, the special meeting of the COFCOR, that's the Council of Foreign and Community Relations of CARICOM, a high-level meeting to commemorate and promote the International Day for the Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, the CARICOM India Foreign Ministers Meeting, and the CARICOM Singapore Foreign Ministers Meeting. I also had bilateral meetings with my counterparts from Chile, Morocco, Tunisia, and the Philippines. Productive meetings were held with all, broadly on cooperation in agriculture, health, and tourism, and significantly, and in pursuit of our policy of engaging with non-traditional partners and deepening that engagement with a focus on Africa and the Pacific, I signed on behalf of the government of Jamaica the joint communique establishing diplomatic relations with Tunisia, the most diversified economy in Africa. Very interesting fact, very interesting country, and one which has a strong tourism industry as well. So we had good discussions about that. In our engagement with Chile, we signed an MOU for cooperation with the Andres Bello Academy on Diplomatic Training of Chile, which is one of the most highly regarded globally, as our ministry seeks to ensure that our foreign service officers have access to the best training opportunities and skills necessary for navigating an ever-changing global environment. Mr. President, also pleased to inform of great importance that I signed on behalf of the government of Jamaica the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. So it's the BB&J Treaty. And it was very difficult to get it placed within the context of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which, as you may know, Mr. President, is viewed as the ocean's constitution, and it is also known as the Montego Bay Convention because, of course, it was agreed at a meeting here in Jamaica, in Montego Bay in 1984. Mr. President, Jamaica played a lead role together with CARICOM in the negotiations, so signature was very important for us, and efforts will now be focused on putting in place the implementing legislation to facilitate ratification of the convention. As we take this work forward, we also encourage other countries to work to reach the goal of 60 ratifications before June next year, when the third UN Oceans Conference will take place. As I wind down, Mr. President, I had the honor of delivering Jamaica's policy statement on the 27th of September, and I provided an update on the significant strides made by the country on the basis of prudent and strategic financial management. And we underscored, however, that notwithstanding these efforts, the support of the international community is still required to ensure that we remain on this trajectory by keeping the goal of 1.5 alive, improving access to development finance, including climate financing, and reforming the international financial architecture. We emphasize these issues as relevant for the wider SIDS community, and we shared the Jamaican example as part of the symbol of hope for what is possible, even if you are small, even if you are vulnerable, even if you have high debt. It is possible to address these issues systematically and emerge with a strong economy. And this is the story of Jamaica, which we are continuing to build as a work in progress. Thank you. Mr. President, Jamaica also called for a lifting of the commercial and financial embargo against Cuba. We expressed support for a two-state solution in respect of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages to bring an end to the protracted war and suffering. We also called for greater support of the international community in restoring peace and stability in Haiti, including through financial assistance and contribution of personnel to the MSSM. Jamaica also reiterated the call for more concrete action from bilateral partners to stem the illicit flow of small arms and light weapons from their ports, so that Jamaica and countries facing similar security threats can comprehensively and sustainably continue to reduce crime. And this is a matter on which we have been engaged directly bilaterally as well. We believe that we have had a breakthrough recently, and we are waiting to hear more. We note that a group of attorneys general in the US have also taken up this issue and have written formally as well. And I hope that that will prevent any backward movement on some of the progress that had been made and help to push it forward. So we are looking forward to hearing further progress. We know some steps have been taken. There have been new laws passed in respect of the management of guns. We now look to how it is that the export aspect is addressed, and also looking at port management and maritime patrols, which continue to be a significant part of the lacuna used by our very innovative criminals in this world. Mr. President, in summary, this high-level week was used to maximize Jamaica's international engagements and to inform the international community of the steps we have taken to achieve our development goals and international peace and security. We also use the opportunity to share the challenges we face in achieving these targets, many of which are due to the vulnerabilities with which we're confronted as a small island developing state. Our participation in these meetings not only serve to bring these issues to the fore, but to influence actions and outcomes that support our needs as well as those of our similar situated countries. In closing, Mr. President, I express my deep appreciation to the highly competent team at the Ministry for their sterling work and unwavering dedication to Jamaica. I want to invite members to join me in extending commendations as well to our missions in Ottawa and Toronto, led by High Commissioner Marsha Corlaban and Consul General Kurt Davis, respectively, as well as to the permanent mission to the UN and the consulate in New York, led by Ambassador Brian Wallace and Consul General Alcion Wilson, respectively. Lastly, and most importantly, Mr. President, here at the Ministry's headquarters, our commendations are also extended to Ambassador Sheila Seeley-Monteith, who is Permanent Secretary, to Ambassador Angela Comfort, Under Secretary for Multilateral Affairs, and their supporting departments. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Sophia Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minister, let me thank you for that tour de France. Very detailed presentation, and it highlighted some things that as Jamaicans we can truly be proud of, and we want to thank you for that. Minister, I followed in your statement, and one of the things that I'm sure you would have spoken about but perhaps have not highlighted here is that of artificial intelligence and the use or the availability thereof. As you are aware, that artificial intelligence has the ability to transform nations, and one of the things as a small island developing state that we ought to be lobbying for is to ensure that its availability is that is accessible to small island developing states, and that the use or the access of it is not treated or done in a way that has the potential to, for want of a better term, bring us back to the days of colonization or bring us further into underdevelopment. So I want to find out first whether any discussion was had, whether in the conference or the margins of the conferences you attended and the Prime Minister attended, in terms of accessibility to artificial intelligence. The other matter that you mentioned was that of climate financing. And we know that within the realm of climate change, climate financing, climate litigation is really the big ticket items. One of the concerns that we have in terms of climate financing is one, well, some of the concerns, one is generally how do we ensure that the persons or the communities or the target groups are benefiting sufficiently? And secondly, on a broader scale, the terms of whether it is loan that are given to us as small island development states, that they are not crafted in a way that will further or that will impact our ability to achieve Vision 2030. And as we talk about Vision 2030, I, like yourself, believe that we have made good strides. And we also thank the PIOG that has a lead role. And we also accept that the environment is changing much faster than we are developing. And in large part, it has nothing to do with the political directorate at the time. It's just how the environment is changing, whether it is climate change and all the effects of climate change, including flooding and high sea level rises. The fact is that it is changing faster than we're developing. And in this regard, there ought to be some, well, let me put it this way. In this regard, I wondered whether at the national level, the conversation has commenced in terms of how do we then rewrite our national development goals to ensure that we move apace or closer pace with the ever-changing environment in which we are forced to live with the multidimensional, multi-hazard of climate change. The BBNJ, you would have seen that the opposition expressed its commendation to the government for signing the BBNJ, the High Seas Treaty. Again, we believe that this is something that, as a progressive country, we ought to sign, and we're very pleased that the government has signed the BBNJ. However, Minister, we have examples of signing international treaties and conventions that we have not ratified. And I wish to ascertain whether, though it is still very early, whether any contemplation has been given by your ministry and the relevant ministries as to a roadmap to ratification. Having signed it, a roadmap for ratification and a possible timeline for ratification. And finally, I noticed that in your presentation, and quite rightly so, you spent a bit of time talking about the situation in Haiti and seeking international support, which the opposition supports that call. But back at home, we have seen, certainly in this past week, several articles about the situation regarding Haitians who have entered Jamaican shore. And Minister, I wish to find out whether there has been, or whether the investigation has commenced into what has been reported of abuse and arbitrary detention of the Haitians, as well as the denial of legal representation, and whether our policy that we have, well, whether the actions that we have embarked upon is in keeping with the international refugee policy. I think those are my questions for now, and then I think Senator Scott Martin, and I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. And I'm going to do my best to answer them to your satisfaction. On AI, in the national policy statement, and I trust that you would not have wanted me to read it all. In addition, right, so we actually did speak about technology and about the fact that it is important, particularly for developing countries, to be able to harness their benefits, and that there therefore needs to be international collaboration on rulemaking, as well as on sharing of technical capacity and transfer of technology and knowledge, so that we are able to so do. And also on the matter of security, cybersecurity in particular, that, as you know, we would have, well, we have been a part of the process towards the UN Convention on Cybersecurity. Jamaica, again, played a lead role. We were the lead country within CARICOM in pursuing that negotiation process, and that convention is now agreed, so it is now to have countries sign on to it, recognizing that as we move forward with technology, with all of the opportunities come increased risks, and therefore we have to be keeping a pace with the security aspect side. So it was a matter that we addressed, and we are looking at both aspects of it. The benefits, as you would have heard with my Consul General example. So that's directly how we're looking at managing the opportunities provided by AI to solve problems practically, and to while keeping an eye on security. So yes, it is very much on our agenda, and it was a part of our call for international cooperation. On climate financing, we continue to be at the forefront of those discussions in many different fora, again calling for operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund to ensure that monies are available to benefit the countries with communities that are most impacted, and making note of the fact that Jamaica, with 70% of our population within 5 kilometers, and industrial activity within 5 kilometers of the coastline, makes it particularly important an issue for us, together with sea level rise, that we are able to address the matter of financing. What we call for always is affordable and equitable financing. So it's not just access, but it is increased access, and it must be affordable and on terms which are equitable. I know you follow these things closely, so you may recall that one of the progressive steps rather that have been made is that the World Bank has now agreed to include debt suspension clauses in its loans. We continue to monitor how it is that we ensure that that takes place without a premium cost on the loans, because that had always been our issue, that they can change the terms, but then they can hide the costs. So we continue to be vigilant on ensuring that there are ways to do that, and also advocating for more inclusion of the private sector and the rating agencies. And we actually co-chaired a meeting with the multinational development banks in the context of the UN, but it was chaired at the ambassadorial level and held at the technical level, to try to work through some of the issues to ensure that where movement is made on either forgiveness or suspension, that there is some consideration within the climate space by the credit rating agencies, because really countries don't want to take action that's going to affect them on the credit rating side, which will affect their cost of debt. And therefore, these matters have to be dealt with holistically. And Jamaica and Canada co-chaired a meeting, and in fact, we were very pleased that the credit rating agencies came, because they don't usually. We've been trying to get them involved for a little while. They come to some meetings, but not all. So we are making progress on that matter. But as you recognize, highly complex, and dealing with financial institutions is always that much more difficult, because they don't see the world in the same way, and they don't see our risks in the same way. So we are continuing to work at changing mindsets. In terms of what we're doing domestically, we do and recognize that climate is changing faster than other matters. And while we're not necessarily rewriting our Agenda 2030, I'm not sure if that is being reviewed, but what we are doing is enhancing our national or NDCs, or national development contributions. So we were one of the first countries, notwithstanding COVID, to file our enhanced contributions, and we are working on meeting the 2025 deadline as well for the next level of enhanced. So this is recognizing that there are things that we are ahead of the game on, and but that we can push harder on, notwithstanding the fact that we are one of the smallest emitters. So we're still trying to balance that. We recognize that we're not a part of the problem necessarily. We are a victim, and but we still recognize that we can play a significant role and continue to do that. So our NDCs are the pathway to ensuring that we are still trying to do more, notwithstanding what the target may be. So we're ahead of, I think, we're ahead of target for terrestrial protection, and still on track for maritime protection. And there'll be some positive announcements about that in due course. On BB&J, we don't have a timeline. You would have heard my call to countries to meet the target of 60 ratifications by next year, June, when UN Conference on the Oceans is held. So we would want to be there as well among the 60. So we're working towards it. That has actually started. But if you ask me if there's a document with a roadmap and specific timelines, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. I can check with climate change, which is LEAD, but heavily supported by Ministry and AGC, where we are in respect of BBNG. But now that we have signed, it really sets off the next course of actions. On Haitians in Jamaica, what I can assure you is that Jamaica is compliant with our policy and best practice. We are compliant. We are also in touch with the Haitian government. I am in touch with my counterpart, Dominique Dupuis. Any Haitians who have been repatriated with the consent of the Haitian government and their prior notification. They have been treated with dignity. There has been no random or arbitrary detentions. We had, in fact, had a consular visit by a Haitian special envoy from Bahamas who came here and toured the different lockups where we do have Haitians because they come in illegally. They have been entering our ports illegally, and therefore they are themselves often in vulnerable circumstances. So there are children in the care of CPFSA. There are persons who find themselves in vulnerable situations and are otherwise having to be managed because trafficking is something that takes place. We think there are persons rather who pursue a narrative that everyone who enters Jamaica comes with a particular mindset, but regrettably that is not so. We have criminals seeking to escape justice who come in by the very same means on the very same boat with a pregnant lady, and they do that for a reason. So we are doing our best to manage the circumstances with dignity, with consideration, and within the law. So there are various persons within a process before the courts waiting for their matter to be heard, or they are waiting for the asylum cases to be processed. All of those are happening within. You know, there was a humanitarian concession made in respect of a grouping that was announced by Minister of National Security earlier in the year. But again, I assure you that not only are we compliant and we recognize our role as a sovereign country to manage illegal entry into our ports in a particular way, we are aware of some of the challenges that exist on the Haitian side, as is clear because of our direct participation and international activity that seeks to solve the push issues, the push factors for individuals. So we're working on both aspects, and we again continue to do our best in respect of the Haitian members of Haitian citizens who have entered our ports. We continue to do our best in that regard.
Permission
Senator Scott Motley,
permission to speak from a seat.
you have that permission.
I want to also join in commending you on this very thorough presentation. I know you must have worked on it for some time. In a way, Senator Fraser-Binns has touched on an aspect that I was concerned about, because as I read or listened to your reports on your engagement with, for example, the President of Kenya, and the focus that Kenya has and the other countries have in terms of Haiti, I have a concern that a part of the agenda has not been to create a policy around those who flee because of their safety. Dominica, for example, has said that, Dominican Republic, I'm sorry, has said that they are going to repatriate 10,000 illegal migrants to Haiti. And it seems to me, Minister, just highly contradictory that the countries are trying to protect the security of Haiti, knowing full well that Haiti is under the management or leadership or influence of terrorist gangs who don't care who it is that they kill, who it is that they maim, and who it is that they rape. But yet, the laws of the countries are being maintained, and that is by sending back people into this very situation. I am totally confused as to what the leaders who are crafting this policy consider when they think that it is a question of putting boots on the grounds without thinking about what persons are actually enduring as a result of being caught in, let me use, civil upheaval, armed combat, destruction, famine. In those circumstances, can't something be done to create even an agreement amongst different countries that they will accept a certain amount of persons for a particular time until the upheaval in Haiti is taken into control? Saying, for example, that we know that Jamaica could take 100, Guyana could take 100. You understand where I'm going with it? Until when the situation now has been abated, and say, for example, our multinational security forces do actually assist in calming the situation, then they can be repatriated, but repatriated to a situation where they can be hopeful about the kind of life that they live. I want to thank you for that comment which you made about that young man, which was off script. And I hope that Senator Hill was listening very carefully, because maybe we have to look at new ways of achieving growth. I was sorry that Senator Morris was not here, because he always says, nothing about us without us. And the young people are certainly showing that they are considering their own situations and resolving the challenges which they face, but in such a productive, encouraging, and inspiring way. And finally, Minister, the information about the ministers, the women who are ministers of foreign affairs, I congratulate you for being one of them. Very significant. And I am pleased to know that you're actively lobbying, along with others, for the first female UN Secretary General. And I certainly look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insights and comments, Senator Scott Motley. And just to share that on the matter of the women foreign ministers, we are actually looking at how we can institutionalize a means by which we can collaborate more effectively, because we are a small grouping, 34 when you consider 193 members of the United Nations. And there's only one in CARICOM at this point, if you recognize that as well. So we're not shining examples in the region, which is not a very good thing. When I became minister, we had 4. But this is the undulation that takes place within political appointments globally, and we recognize that. But it's part of the concern about a retrenchment rather than a moving forward, especially when you recognize how much security, geopolitical differences, security issues, and conflict manifest nowadays, and the statistically proven role of successful maintenance of peace, where women are involved in negotiations and peace building. So it is there's work to be done, substantive work. Someone had made a light comment to say that, you know, I'm sure people think that we're here talking about flowers and shopping, and you know, because it's the type of sort of patriarchal perspective that where women are gathered, this is what they discuss. And certain people can remain quiet. Certain people can remain quiet, but there really is a very different perspective that is brought to the table and a possible difference in outcome when we're present. And there's some deep insight on how we can work more effectively to try to bring that perspective forward. On the matter of Haiti, there is a clear difficulty in how the issue of illegal migration and the issue of a sovereign responsibility to manage the safety of your population as well as the costs to the public, because rest assured, and I'm sure at some point there will be a sharing of the costs that it now is now attributed to taxpayers for the Haitians who are here and those who are within government care in different capacities, including in particular those who have the asylum appeal being undertaken. That is a cost to the taxpayers of Jamaica. And that is why the public perspective on that is also so strong. And this is not unique to Jamaica. So there is a very difficult balancing act which we have been seeking to attain and to manage by working on not only the political side but the operational side to try to support from first in advocacy and now in actual provision of personnel and on capacity and proposals on investment and bringing in more private and public sector and multilateral actors to support Haiti. So trying to look at solving the fundamentals while also managing the very real national issues which we have as a small developing country seeking to grow. We view our managed and I think less numerically significant actions in respect of the repatriation of Haitians to be the best possible balance at this time. And we are deeply concerned, and we're in fact discussing it among CARICOM foreign ministers about the action taken by DOMREP, announced by DOMREP, because there's quite a distinction to be made between mass deportations, which are difficult to manage, which can create chaos, which create a weight administratively and socioeconomically, as opposed to where we are engaged directly as we are and managing smaller numbers in return. And in that point, I want to also make the point clear and make the fact clear that the gangs are generally in Port-au-Prince. There is now some seepage and some outreach which is taking place, but they are not present everywhere in Haiti. And this is one of the reasons why when someone claims asylum or claims refugee status, there is a legal process to prove that you are in fact entitled to that. The fact that you move from one country to another, whether legally or illegally, internationally or nationally, does not ever grant you that status automatically. In every country, there's a legal process. Jamaica is the only country in the Caribbean now that has a refugee policy, and we do stick to that policy. There's a process, there's a court process. It is now there are several persons which are now under appeal. That is within our law, and it is, again, I reaffirm the sensitivity and appropriateness and best possible approach that is taken. First, we had them in the seventh-day camp was assisting us with their accommodation. There is now an alternative that has had to be found, which is in place. And there's a humanitarian approach that's being taken to their presence here. And that's managed and as balanced as it can be. There are countries that had previously stated that they would take, that they would be willing to accept Haitian refugees. I believe Brazil was one at a point, and I believe because of the numbers, Brazil, with the size of Brazil, even had to say that they would need to take a pause and revisit their policy on how they manage. It's a difficult situation. We don't support mass deportations, at all. It is a matter of great concern to us, but we recognize the right of countries to manage their national circumstances as well as Jamaica is doing. So I hope this helps in their understanding of what a difficult set of circumstances that we are considering. But again, we're working on the fundamental side, all the support that can be given within our means and within the law, and all that can be done here, again, within the law, including the accordance of consular visits and our engagement directly with the Haitian government on matters of repatriation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson Smith. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: annual report and audited financial statements of the Jamaica Information Service for the financial years 2018-2019, 2019-2020, 2020-2021. Auditor General's Department certified appropriation accounts, head 15,010, in relation to the Jamaica Information Service for the year 2021-2022. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Banana Board for the year ended December 31, 2021, and its related ministry paper numbered 74/2024. Annual report and audited financial statements of the NMIA Airports Limited for the financial year 2020-2021. The National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection Roseneath Park Housing Development Order 2024. Jamaica First Supplementary Estimates 2024-2025. Jamaica Public Bodies First Supplementary Estimates of Revenue and Expenditure for the year ended March 2025. And finally, the Government of Jamaica Fiscal Policy Paper for the financial year 2024-2025 interim report dated October 8, 2024.
Bills brought from the Honorable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. To the Honorable Senate, I have the honor to advise the Honorable Senate that on the first day of October 2024, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Judicature Rules of Court Act was passed in the House of Representatives. Juliet Onus, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Then I signify my willingness to take charge of this bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Judicature Rules of Court Amendment Act 2024 read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notes of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection Roseneath Park Housing Development Order 2024 under the National Housing Trust Act, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 11th day of October 2024, be referred to the Regulations Committee of the Senate for consideration and report. Mr. President, I also beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Mr. President, I also beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move, whereas on the 9th day of October 2020, this Honorable Senate appointed a special select committee to sit jointly with a similar committee appointed by the House of Representatives to consider and report on private bills. And whereas on the 1st day of October 2024, the House of Representatives, by motion taken and approved, referred a bill shortly entitled the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel in Jamaica, Incorporation and Vesting Act 2024, to its Private Bills Committee for consideration and report. Be it resolved that the Private Bills Committee of the Senate, in keeping with its terms of reference, sit jointly with the Private Bills Committee of the House of Representatives to consider and report on the aforementioned bill. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move, be it resolved, with reference to the resolution passed by this Honorable Senate on the 2nd day of February 2024, agreeing that the composition of all committees of the Senate remain unchanged in this session of the Parliament, except by approved resolution of the Senate, that the following be approved: that the name Abkapit Henley be removed from the membership of the Senate Standing Orders Committee, and that the name Shireen Golding Campbell be substituted therefore. And Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Mr. President, I also beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following: the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Act, the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Amendment of First Schedule Order 2024 Resolution. Whereas by virtue of Section 43B of the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, by order, amend the schedules to the Act other than the custodial penalties. And whereas by virtue of said section, an order made under that section shall be subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas on the 5th day of June 2024, the Minister made the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Amendment Order 2024, and whereas it is desirable that the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Amendment of First Schedule Order 2024 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Amendment of First Schedule Order 2024 Resolution. 2. The Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Amendment of First Schedule Order 2024 is hereby affirmed. And Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take this motion. I think that is the last of them, Mr. President.
I think so too. Questions and answers to questions? Senator Lambert-Rowe.
Yeah, President, I noticed that on the question notice paper. Question asked by Senator Bunting is not there, and question asked by myself is not here.
All right, Senator Brown, I'm being advised by that the matter you're raising was raised at the last sitting and was pointed out by the President, Standing Order Rule 15.3, which says that a member who desires an oral answer to a question shall mark his notice with an asterisk, and a question not so marked shall require a written answer, which, when received, shall be circulated with the minutes of proceedings of the Senate. And I am informed that that was so done.
President, last week we agreed that there's no hard copy, no written answers given then, and therefore would not take the questions then, but would take them at the next sitting. And it is on that basis that I intend to pursue from the Minister whether the answers to my questions duly made are available, and if so, to seek those answers today.
I understand that it was circulated in the minutes.
Which
And the
minutes?
minutes are available to all members.
No, no. We were told that it will be taken today.
On Monday? It was actually circulated on Monday. Senator Brown.
Yeah. Was my understanding is that the Senate would today take the answers. Because if the answers are not to be given in the Senate, but to be circulated in the minutes that is yet to be confirmed, that certainly strikes me as the way to avoid answering questions inside the Senate where the questions are asked.
No,
I
would not say that if the standing orders provides for the process by which the matter should go, then you can't say that it is avoiding providing an answer.
Are you saying to us, President?
I'm saying that it is in the standing orders.
That the standing order said that the question that has never been used before. So if this is a new thing now, let us be told. Because I expect to get the answers here, so I can raise follow-up if need be. If you put in the minutes, then, and that's it, how do we then pursue these issues in the Senate?
So let me ask you, Senator Brown, because you're holding a document in your hand. That is the minutes that you have?
No, the question.
I'm asking you.
No, it's not the minutes.
It's not. Okay.
I don't have the minutes. What I have is the question that I was asked. And in fact, the minister has been kind enough to send to her assistant a short while ago the voluminous answer of 41 pages. It's not my intention for her to go through all of them, but I still need answer to the questions I asked. And so the issue is whether or not, as a senator, having properly followed the convention, submit questions, whether those questions are going to be answered in the chamber. That's the issue. And if it's not going to, why is the change?
All right. Senator, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the advice that you have been given, if I understand correctly, is correct. But the point made by Senator Brown that this is not a process of which he is previously aware, and in the context where, if I understand correctly, last week it was said that they would be taken this week, that having been stated, yes, then I think it is not unreasonable, and the minister has indicated her willingness, notwithstanding the technical point, which perhaps we now need to be guided by, now that we have been made aware. We have been made aware. There's a rule. If it has been ignored, that's not a reason to continue to ignore it. We have now become aware, so we should now follow that process. However, given that this was not a matter to be considered in respect of these questions or these answers, and Minister having indicated that she's prepared to answer and to deal with the follow-ups as appropriate, then I suggest that we go that way, and then we can, familiarize all of the senators with this particular standing order and the process to be used going forward, and we be guided by the rules in that context.
All right, so you're ready.
Just to I must say, though, Mr. President, the voluminous nature of the answers do lend themselves to a particular treatment. But just for the record, to make sure that it is there, that the relevant paragraph is where it states quite clearly that a member who desires an oral answer to a question shall mark his notice with an asterisk, and a question not so marked shall require a written answer, which, when received, shall be circulated with the minutes of proceedings of the Senate. So the parliamentary staff has followed the appropriate rule in the standing order, but given that this is not something of which we have been aware previously, I think it is not unreasonable for us to simply proceed. And we can go back to the standing orders on another occasion.
Senator Scott Motley,
I think, respectfully, President, that when you were sitting as chairman this morning in the Standing Orders Committee, I did make a reference to these minutes. And I do have some concerns which I intend to raise on the next occasion that the standing orders meet. For example, the minutes will say that they have been seconded by a particular senator, or the motion has been moved for confirmation has been moved by a particular senator, and I've never been aware of that being done. So I think that we need to look at the minutes and determine, since it has been raised today, just how the minutes are developed and confirmed, the process around the minutes. I don't need to make a point of it because the minister has graciously acknowledged that this has not been the practice. And so we look forward to having the response.
all right. So we continue to follow the procedure. There is a motion that will have to be taken having regard to the time. Minister.
Mr. President, the time being midday, I now move that the Senate be allowed to receive and answer questions at this time.
You have heard the question. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Senator Brown?
Yeah, Mr. President, may I receive answers to the questions I posed some time ago and that are standing in my name?
Minister.
Thank you. Mr. President, I rise to respond to questions posed by Senator Brown on tribunals, and they were quite lengthy ones. And just before we begin, our administration does not shy away from responding to questions from the media or from other Senate colleagues. I would have been prepared to respond 2 weeks ago also on these questions, and they are actually very good questions, Senator Brown, and it showed that you are thinking very similarly to how the administration was was thinking. Mr. President, the questions posed sought detailed information regarding the various tribunals and appeal tribunals within the government, including their total number, their names, the ministries responsible for them, and the legislation authorizing their existence. Additionally, my colleague Senator asked for me to provide data on the number of matters handled by each tribunal from 2020 to 2023 and a list of their membership. Mr. President, this undertaking required significant effort from all ministries of government to compile the comprehensive answers due to the complexity and scope of the information requested, and that's why the responses are 41 pages long, Mr. President. Gathering and compiling the responses to these extensive questions demanded significant effort due to the sheer breadth of information required, spanning multiple ministries and laws. This process involved coordinating with various departments, reviewing multiple years of case data, and verifying current and past tribunal membership, making the preparation of these answers a somewhat time-consuming and detailed task. And so today's response is therefore no small feat, and I will try, Senator Brown, to summarize the answer, not read the 41 pages.
Having received from the minister the copy, I'll spare her reading the 41 pages if she just answers question number 1.
I'll go through, I'll come.
Because number 1 essentially asks how many tribunals or so exist. And then the other questions is where the detail comes. I can forego you answering those because we have that. I'll ask you some follow-up. Right.
Mr. President, I'll still continue with the summary because there were several questions that were asked, and given that our oral response was requested, I will do an oral response. So, Mr. President, in total, 13 ministries responded in relation to 50 tribunals. So there are 50 tribunals. The Ministry of Gender, Entertainment and Culture has 2. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has 6. The Ministry of Justice has 7. The Ministry of Tourism has 1. The Ministry of Local and Social Security has 2. The Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce has 7. The Ministry of National Security has 4. The Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecoms and Transport has 3. The Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation has 3. The Ministry of Education and Youth has 2. The Ministry of Finance and the Public Service has 9. The Ministry of Local Government and Community Development has 2. And the Office of the Prime Minister has 2. And in terms of, I'm just going to go through in terms of some of the other questions that had been raised. You know, the composition of each of these was requested, and we had to provide that information, and that's provided in the written response that was given. But I remind my colleagues, Mr. President, that tribunals play a critical role in the administrative process and in the delivery of justice and good governance, and they serve as independent bodies to resolve disputes, adjudicate issues, and provide redress in very specialized areas. Each tribunal is established by virtue of several different pieces of legislation, and they're instituted as per the key principle of due process. When you look through the responses, Mr. President, you will find that some tribunals are duly constituted, some have not been constituted, and that is because some tribunals are constituted when there is a matter to be had. One of the things you will note too, in many cases, these bodies require the appointment of individuals with very specialized skills, professional qualifications, and tremendous experience drawn from a limited pool of experts. And for example, Mr. President, if you look at the different emergency powers tribunals in the documentation that would have been circulated, you would see several names repeating many times over. Mr. President, a significant factor that contributes to the delays in establishing several tribunals in Jamaica is the limited pool of willing and qualified judicial and quasi-judicial or legal professionals. When you go through all of the legislations, you find that the persons who should be on the tribunal are retired judges. This is something you see over and over again. And so you constantly see the same names coming up over and over again on the list. And also, many of the tribunals, for example, have been working very hard. Some have not seen many cases before them. So ones that we would point out are the Teachers' Appeal Tribunal, the Strata Appeals Tribunal, the Emergency Powers Review Tribunal, and the Consumer Protection Tribunal, as well as the Industrial Dispute Tribunal, who have been dealing with many, many matters. But there's a contrast, Mr. President. Many tribunals have not had any matter referred to them for years. For example, of all the active bodies under the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, in terms of the tribunals there, not one had any matters brought to their attention for action since 2020. So these are ones that are constituted, the members are listed and have been appointed, and no matters coming before them. Similarly, the tribunals under the Ministry of Science, under MSET, had no activity whatsoever since 2020. And so even if we look at some specifics, the Electricity Appeals Tribunal, with its membership in place, for example, had 0 matters before it. The Road Traffic Appeal Tribunal, which is fully constituted, had 0 members before it, 0 matters before it. The Disabilities Rights Tribunal had 0 matters, and that's fully constituted. Whereas, for example, you have an IDT with 27 matters in 2021, 44 in 2022, 42 in 2023, and another one, such as the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Board, had 573 in 2020, 1,130 in 2021, 2,587 in 2022, and 1,879 in 2023. So it's a mixed bag, Mr. President, and Senator Brown, who raised the question. And so as a consequence, Mr. President, the government is currently exploring a review of the legal and procedural frameworks governing these tribunals to explore potential solutions, including amendments to the appointment processes, consolidation of tribunals, as well as more proactive recruitment strategies to attract the necessary personnel. And so this exercise dovetailed with that articulated approach, which is looking back at the tribunals to make sure that we're doing them correctly. Mr. President, this process of reviewing tribunals requires time and careful deliberation. And as a government, we are taking the concrete steps to ensure that our tribunals are fully operational and they meet the evolving needs of our society. We're therefore committed to strengthening the framework with the urgency and thoroughness they deserve. And I thank you for the question, Senator Brown, and I look forward to the continued support of this Honorable Senate as we move forward in advancing transparency and accountability, and may I also add efficiency in our governance framework. Mr. President, may it please you.
Thank you, Senator Morris. Senator Brown.
Yes, President. I thank the Minister for the answer, but could you share with me that, because that is different from this. So I'd appreciate receiving from you that. And I agree with you that we have approximately 50 tribunals. But among the list, the 41 pages you share with me, you'd appreciate that the NIDS tribunal is not accounted for in that from the Office of the Prime Minister. But that's one other tribunal that exists. There's also, under the Ministry of Labor, tribunals dealing with medical board under the NIS. That those are not listed among those. And of course, having sat here and passed the JACRA legislation, JACRA is a tribunal, but in fact you said 13 ministry answered. The Ministry of agriculture, fishery and mining did not respond. Would you agree with that? Is one of the questions I'm asking you. And they have JACRA tribunal, they have fisheries tribunal, and under the mining section, the Commission of Mining does act as a tribunal in dealing with matters. So would appreciate an update on those tribunals that were not received. Would the minister also agree that the ATI tribunal, access to information, that since April, a recommendation has been made for reappointment, but 6 months after, we're still without an access to information tribunal? Could we get an update on that, especially since you're saying the government is thinking the way I am thinking about the multiplicity of these tribunals, something I've spoken to over and over from inside the Senate. So could you also confirm whether the sexual harassment tribunal, a law we passed some time ago, whether that is functional? And I would say to you, Minister, it's not true to say that the Disability Rights Tribunal has no matter before them. Mr. Leiber has been meeting at the IDT building on a Saturday with his team. So I know that there are cases involving disability. So the information you have received, Minister, doesn't seem to be full. And the Data Protection Act also has a tribunal. Could you tell us whether or not that tribunal has been established and functioning? And I will stop at that. But I thank you for saying that the government is now appreciating the need to review this multiplicity of tribunals. And I'm thanking them, yeah. You can. But to recognize that this multiplicity of tribunals really need to look at. And I know that there are other legislation that is coming that propose tribunals as well. So I fear that it's not so much that people don't want to serve, it's that some ministries and ministers have just been ineffective in appointing these tribunals. And the list is here, so I'm sure those who have an interest outside will be able to look at it. Arvin, you have how many? About 7, I believe, tribunal under you? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown.
Mr. President,
Senator
I just want
Scott
to point out something to the minister which she has here and which is of grave concern. The Microcredit Act was passed in 2021. The Bank of Jamaica has issued instructions to persons that they cannot practice in the area of finance due to their not being fit and proper. The Act sets up a scheme by which you are entitled to appeal. But there is no appeal tribunal since 2021 for a person who has been so disqualified to appeal to. And I can tell you that up to about 2 weeks ago, I made an inquiry from the Bank of Jamaica, and that has still not been constituted. And I think that that is a disgrace in the sense that people cannot get employment within the field for which they are qualified, but cannot have an appeal heard.
Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleague ministers, for your follow-up question. Senators, my colleague senators, for these questions, follow-up questions. And just to note, in terms of the NIDS tribunal, the elements of the NIRA, National Identification and Registration Act, not all of the provisions have been put in place. We've not done the appointed day notices yet, but we do recognize that once we do that, the NIDS tribunal will be necessary. In relation to, you had also asked about the Data Protection Tribunal. That relates to certain provisions of the Data Protection Act which have not come into place yet. We've not put those in place yet, and so the tribunal is not there as yet. In terms of the Ministry of Agriculture, I will check on that because all of the ministries had, well, most ministries had responded, and if they're not in the documentation, it means they had no tribunals. And so I will check on that, and I'll give you a written response. I'll give you a response on that one. I'll just write you on that one. In terms of the sexual harassment tribunal status, I will also get that. And that's established. I'm being told that that one is in fact established, but we can confirm that. In terms of the Microcredit Act, there are some tribunals which we did acknowledge in the documentation that have not been established, and this is the reason why we need to look back at consolidation, because there's so many different ones. There are 50 of them. That's a very inefficient process. There can be pooling of particular subject matters so that you don't have to go and appoint another one each time. And I'm very glad that across the aisle we agree on that. And I know I've spoken to Minister Malahoo Fort, who is looking at this and actually putting together a document to propose changes in this respect. In terms of the ATI Tribunal and an update on that one, as you are aware, that the term of that, the membership had expired, and that law says we have to have consultation with the opposition on the membership of that tribunal. That was done. The suggested names were sent to the Leader of the Opposition. A response was received from the Leader of the Opposition, and those names were sent to the Governor General. They are appointed by the Governor General. At my last check on Wednesday, the Governor General's office indicated that they had signed the appropriate orders to facilitate them being appointed. So I'm very glad to say that the ATI Tribunal has been constituted. And so I think that was all of the questions there, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Minister, and it really put in a different light when I heard some of the descriptive words that were used coming from Senator Brown. Yes, Senator Brown. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I now ask that the motions in respect of the Senate Standing Orders Committee, the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel in Jamaica Incorporation and Vesting Act 2024, and the National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection Roseneath Park Housing Development Order 2024 under the National Housing Trust Act be approved, and that I be in a position to commence the debate on the MOCA.
All right, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister, you can proceed with the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this order had been tabled in the Senate in June, June 28th, and therefore has been with us a bit for a bit of time. So I'm pleased that we can bring this matter to a close today. The Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency, MOCA, is an invaluable and effective tool in the fight against organized criminal activity in Jamaica. This order is designed to strengthen the agency's investigative scope, further strengthening Jamaica's security architecture. The government has been committed to strengthening Jamaica's security architecture to secure life, property, and socioeconomic stability. And we've invested more in this process than has ever been done before in our security forces in terms of training, recruitment, compensation and equipment, station improvements and vehicles, and of course the provision of the requisite budget to agencies such as MOCA. We've also made social interventions in volatile communities to provide the first steps and opportunities for effective socioeconomic participation and upliftment. We've promoted violence prevention, including programs for conflict resolution and restorative justice. And, Mr. President, our strategic investments and efforts have been yielding results, encouraging results. In 2023, Jamaica saw a reduction in all major crimes, with murders down by 7.8% at the end of the year, shootings down approximately 6, rape, robbery, and break-ins down between 12 and 17. And this year, as at October 5, over the previous year, murders are down 18%, shootings are down a further 6, murder is down by 18%, a further 18%, shootings are down a further 6%, rape is down a further 30.7%, robberies are down a further 19.3%, and break-ins less so at a further 3.9%. So with the numbers that were reported in 2023, we recorded our lowest level of major crime in more than 22 years. So as you would have recognized, we are well below that now. Mr. President, but even as we make progress on creating a Jamaica that is safe for all, and we recognize that so much more work is done, after so many years of underinvestment and lack of investment in the security architecture, there is a lot for us to do. Organized crime and violence has therefore been identified as one of our greatest threats as a nation state. The criminals have been becoming more organized and more aggressive, and we therefore have to respond effectively. Mr. President, senators would recall the horrific killing of 8 people in Clarendon on Cherry Tree Lane by organized criminals, organized gangs. These weren't random shootings. Moreover, Mr. President, the threat to national security by organized crime has become entangled in transnational webs. This is not something we can ignore or seek to deal with in a singular, or rather in a single-minded way. The government has therefore been better positioning Jamaica to fight gangs, to fight violence and crime that increasingly takes on international dimensions. Mr. President, the government recognizes that a robust legislative framework is critical to this process, and therefore over the years we have passed and amended legislation. The Anti-Gang Amendment Act, the Corrections Amendment Act 2021, Trafficking in Persons Amendment Act, and Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulation Act 2022. Significantly, the MOCA, having been established in 2014, was formalized by statute in 2018 and officially operationalized as an autonomous entity on April 1st, 2021, when the Act came into force. So the Act only came into force in 2021. Mr. President, MOCA is the first agency of its kind in Jamaica. The value added to law enforcement by MOCA over the past decade speaks for itself. And since January 2020 to present, MOCA has conducted approximately 98 targeted operations, resulted in a total of 85 persons being arrested, 84 of which were formally charged. And one critical reminder of the agency's work and worth, Mr. President, may be found in the Manchester Parish Corporation fraud case in 2020, where the former Deputy Superintendent of Roads and Works, along with 3 co-accused, were convicted of defrauding the entity of an estimated $40 million. Mr. President, the Principal Act, among other things, establishes the agency's mandate and contextualizes its focus by defining the term serious crime. Serious crime means an offense which is specified or falls within a description specified in the first schedule, which the Director General considers to be sufficiently serious for the agency to conduct an investigation under this Act after considering any of the following factors. A, whether or not the crime is transnational in nature, or B, whether or not the crime poses a significant threat to national security and public safety. The order before us seeks to amend the first schedule of the MOCA Act, which details the offenses in respect of which the agency may initiate investigations, to empower MOCA's agents to effectively investigate and prosecute a broader range of serious matters. So, Mr. President, the agency was originally formed through a merger of the then MOCA Task Force and the Anti-Corruption Branch of the JCF. This resulted in a combined formation with members from both the JDF and JCF. And in addition, the merger carried a particular legacy in terms of the types of crimes that these formations investigated. That is the MOCA Task Force and the Anti-Corruption Branch. And they were enabled, therefore, by the powers vested in police officers pursuant to the Constabulary Force Act 1935. Consequent on the full implementation of the MOCA Act, the JCF members who were transitioned to special agents could only operate within the confines of that statute and were no longer able to exercise the full powers of a constable as provided under the Constabulary Force Act. So effectively, certain investigations have since been stymied due to the agency's inability to exercise powers in respect of certain offenses not included in the first schedule. So essentially, there was a legacy about how they were defined, and what they have found out is that there could be greater utility in adding certain other serious offenses which have been found to have transnational manifestations. So this amendment to the MOCA Act will expand the pool of offenses for which the agency may proceed against persons associated with or otherwise involved in organized criminal activity. Essentially, or rather in summary, the legislation, pieces of legislation from which offenses will be pulled include the Larceny Act 1942, the Forgery Act 42, Criminal Justice Administration Act 2014, the Road Traffic Act 2018, the Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulation Act 2022, very important, Betting Games and Lotteries Act 1966, Fisheries Act 2018, also very important with illegal and unreported fisheries, fishing taking place, Predial Larceny Prevention Act, also very important, and common law offenses to include misconduct of public office, conspiracy, cheating the public revenue, and inchoate offenses. Mr. President, I will now outline the specific amendments to be made to the schedule to make provisions for the aforementioned legislation, which either constitute offenses that are consistently featured in the investigations conducted by the agency or are considered as having sufficient gravitas to qualify as a serious crime. Mr. President, under the Larceny Act, it is proposed that Section 5, simple larceny, be included. Section 13, predial larceny. Section 17, larceny of postal articles. Section 22, larceny and embezzlement by clerks and servants. Section 24, fraudulent conversion. Section 27, frauds by directors, etc. Section 28, fraudulently inducing persons to invest money. Section 29, falsification of accounts. 35, obtaining money by false pretenses. 36, obtaining credit by fraud. And 46, receiving. All offenses under the Forgery Act and under the Criminal Justice Administration Act, the offense of tipping off under 39A, and the offense of falsifying, concealing, destroying, or otherwise disposing of documents relevant to an investigation under 39B. The Road Traffic Act, it will seek to insert Section 13.5B of the Road Traffic Act to replace references to the existing 46.1A of the 1938 Act. Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, Section 48, offenses in connection with lotteries, and 49A, licensing of lottery agencies, and 46, offenses in relation to pick-up and drop ban. Mr. President, under the Fisheries Act, Section 25, fishing without a license, permit, or authorization, non-compliance. Section 26, prohibition of activities that undermine and contravene international or regional conservation or management treaties or agreement. Section 75, duty to comply with fishery inspector. Offense of destruction of evidence and avoidance of seizure under 76. Under 77, offense of impersonating a fishery inspector. 89, offenses involving prohibited fishing methods and items in custody. 91, general offenses involving fishing vessels and fishing devices, fishery inspectors and observers. 92, offense of stealing from traps, and 94, offense relating to fishing in fish sanctuaries or habitats. Under predial larceny, Section 11, the powers of search. 13, assault, obstructing, or threatening an agricultural warden. 14, disposal of perishable agricultural produce, livestock, and fish. 15, penalty on possession of clothing, etc., by persons not agricultural wardens. 16, penalty on unauthorized use of agricultural warden uniforms. Common law offenses, as I named before. So, Mr. President, as we continue to innovate and look at how it is that we ensure that, and to review our laws to ensure that they are best aligned with the needs of our security forces in the pursuit of our fight against crime and violence, and how it is that we work to address and arrest the problem of crime in our society, enabling our agencies and fortifying the legislative framework to dismantle criminal organizations in an effective and sustainable manner. We have this order before us, and I therefore commend it for affirmation by the Senate. I look forward to the views of colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Brown.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, MOCA was indeed set up in 2014. The People's National Party was in government. It was set up so that the country could focus a set of high-level security people, pulling from the army and the anti-corruption in the police, against corrupting acts. It was not just another anti-crime measure, but a big part of the focus was against corruption. Because, as the current president of the PSOJ, Mr. Metri Seaga, said some years ago, I think it was 2019, 2017, that corruption eats away annually 5% of GDP. At that time, 5% of GDP was 700 million, or is it billion, US, 735 million US. So corruption is something that holds back the country. Just this week, I saw the Integrity Commission put out something which says even mental health is affected by corruption. Lack of resources for dealing with mentally ill. But MOCA is about anti-corruption in addition to crime fighting. A big issue for us, as in my view, this expansion of things seems to be diluting the MOCA function from that big anti-corruption drive that it needs to make to simple larceny, for which a police force of 14,000 ought to be focused, not MOCA. MOCA need to be looking at accounts that receive abnormal cash injections over a short period of time. For example, I know when I throw the stone, which pig will scream. So, for example, if in my account, over a 3-month period, 20 cash transaction is made. Cashless card transaction is made, amounting to $4 or $5 or $6 or whatever $1 million. That's something that a red flag in the banking system should fly up. And certainly that's something that MOCA, working in collaboration with the FID or whichever other agency, would address and ought to address. So I am concerned that to add simple last name to their agenda, to look at the man in Westmoreland who went out to fish without his license, or in St. James, or in St. Anne, that MOCA must now focus on that person, or the fish sanctuary in St. Mary. MOCA ought to be focusing on the big fish, the kingfish, those who are taking kickbacks from contractors, those who are getting kickback from PR companies. MOCA ought to be focused more, not on the simple crime that the 14,000 police ought to be addressing, but on the criminal connection to corruption. And so, for example, Mr. President, what I would like to see us saying to MOCA is help us develop an approach to unexplained wealth. So we can put unexplained wealth into our laws in order to deal with unexplained wealth. The Governor General, in a throne speech from here, tell us that that was a government priority. So what I'm saying, let MOCA help us develop that policy on unexplained wealth. Something that the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago have passed. Let them tell us how, if there's any lessons to be learned from the 2022 case from Jamaica to the Privy Council dealing with the Proceeds of Crime Act, where a lawyer was charged for assisting somebody involved in money laundering. That's a case the Privy Council dealt with. And in that case, the Privy Council, in paragraph 86, spoke to the issue of privacy versus the public interest. And the view of the Privy Council is that in the investigation of crime and these issues, the public interest trumps the cry of privacy and family interest. That's what the Privy Council said, paragraph 86 of the Babbitt Simpson, Don Satterway's judgment. That's our highest court. So our highest court doesn't seem, my brother Ransford, to be of the view that unexplained wealth order or the POCO arrangement is unconstitutional. So it's clear to me. Say whatever you want to say now, friend. It just show me that the stone is leaking. I'm happy. So, Mr. President, illicit enrichment is what we ought to be soliciting MOCA on. How to strengthen POCA is what we ought to be strengthening, working on. We should be using MOCA to assist us in investigating the threat against our dear and beloved Prime Minister. Because recently we were told that our dear and beloved Prime Minister had a situation where massive police presence was rushed to his house. We were told initially it was a bomb threat. And then we were then told that it was a threat against the Prime Minister, which the police repelled. However, the country is still awaiting and would benefit from MOCA being strengthened enough to investigate, to tell us, are there external forces or internal forces that is threatening our Prime Minister? MOCA could tell us that. So I hope that in the schedule, I would see something which says, instead of Prida last night, the man thief in Aki at King's house, the fisherman going out at sea at Alligator Pond without his license. I'd have expected to see provision where our Prime Minister could be protected. And that MOCA would help the country in understanding what happened in Beverly Hills recently. And also wish, Mr. President, to see and hear from the government telling us that MOCA has developed intelligence to reduce the mass shooting in the country, not just Cherry Tree Lane. Betheltown in Westmoreland, Cassava Peace in St. Andrew, Hanover, your dear St. James, President and Senator Allen, throughout the country. So I'd like to see the role that MOCA is going to play. And that must mean, Minister, that you must give MOCA their full establishment. We're being told that MOCA is between 50 and 60% of its establishment. So they're short. And we're giving them more things to go fish sanctuary, Prida larceny, simple larceny. Where's the priority? The priority must be about those who in 3 years have $470 million going through their account when their salary was running at $12 million a year. That's what I want to see MOCA being given the power and the resources to tackle big fish, kingfish, major corruption. Not the little man with the dozen Aki at King's house. Not the little man who got to sea but didn't have his license, or his license had expired and it had not been renewed. That's not who MOCA needs to be going at. MOCA must focus on the corruption. Because you see, President, Metro Seaga said it right. He quoted the extent to which the people of the country in various polls feel that politicians are among the most corrupt. And in recent polls, this government is being seen as among the most corrupt government in the history of our country. And therefore, we have the courage to bring MOCA into being. You now must fully staff MOCA. You must focus MOCA on illicit enrichment. It cannot be, Mr. President, that we believe as parliamentarians. Let me pause and say it differently. It cannot be that parliamentarians feel that the 2001 or thereabout legislation on corruption prevention dealing with illicit enrichment. It cannot be that we as parliamentarians want to see that offense of illicit enrichment removed from the statute books of the country. It must be an offense, especially since we set up an integrity commission to address issues like those. And we have seen annual reports from the integrity commission. First saying there are 6, and then there are 2 more. That 8 among us are being investigated for illicit enrichment. That is 8 of the 64 plus 21, 84. 10% of the parliamentarians. And if you reduce it, because to the best of my knowledge, I am not being investigated for illicit enrichment. Damian, if I am being investigated, it must be for illicit impoverishment. Yes. If I am being investigated, it must be for illicit impoverishment, but certainly not illicit enrichment. And if, Mr. President, MOCA is given the job and the resources to go after those engaged in illicit enrichment, then we don't need to pack them up with these other tasks. Let them focus on the ones that is 5% of GDP. Because, you see, it will make it easier for Minister Hill to get up and tell us we have a booming economy, as he said the last time. If, Senator Hill, we got rid of that corruption, that 5% would come back on the GDP, and you would get your 5 in 4. But unfortunately, instead of 5 in 4, because there's no corruption, or reduced corruption significantly, what we're getting is -4 in 8 years. Because we have seen the Minister of Finance telling us that this year going to be negative. The projection was for 1.8 growth. Now the projection is 0.2 negative growth. That's a 2% off target. And we don't know if we're going to get the equivalent of a Ellen or a Milton. So, but Marjorie Taylor says Beryl is madeable. Marjorie Taylor Greene says is a machine of government. But the key thing, Mr. President, is that if we resource MOCA, we don't have to give them these tasks of simple larceny, pre-da larceny, fishing act. Go after the pick-up-pole man or the drop-on man. What we need to get them going after is the kingfish. The kingfish behind the cocaine found at Bascobel Aerodrome. That's what we need MOCA. That's what we need MOCA for. Because we hear St. Mary's a special place. We hear that's a special place, St. Mary's. So I'm so happy for my friend, APCA fits in me. As a Parliamentary Secretary and the Office of Prime Minister, I understand how you feel. Well, Mr. President, as I close, we need a MOCA that is fully staffed, not 50% staffed. We need a MOCA that goes after illicit enrichment, and we need to keep that in our laws. We need a MOCA that helps us develop and explain wealth order. With those, our country will see the possibility of growth. Because we have taken the corruption out of it. And let me be clear. This week, Senator Williams, I wrote a poem this week. I shared it with a couple of his colleagues. And a friend of mine said, put it in Chat GPT. And it came out even nicer than what I wrote. But amongst, it spoke about the potholes. But what I did was to identify by name some of the potholes. One was illicit enrichment. One was I failed the IC test. But that poem I'll share it with you spoke about the potholes. If we can get MOCA to deal with the corruption, then the contractors who put 1 inch of asphalt where 4 inches of asphalt should go would have better roads, former mayor. Would have better roads. Because we know that what is involved in some of the corruption is kickbacks. Whether we sell government property for cheaper than it should be sold, and kickback takes place. Whether there's a Canadian Prime Minister, which is why I'm saying MOCA, the father of the current Prime Minister in Canada. He was brought down because through PR companies, he was getting kickback for PR contracts. That's what I need the MOCA to be looking at. I'm hearing in Jamaica that we're going to establish a PR company to deal with spark, roads. We know which road we want to fix. What I want to make sure MOCA is able to do is to cut out the kickbacks, cut out the corruption, so our roads can last longer. Our motors don't have front-end damages that they have. Wrong direction to be going after predation. Let the normal police go after that. Unless you can tell me you're going after predation, not the man who take the Aki at King's house, but the man who is moving the truck and stealing the cows. Tell me, is that one you're going after? Who is able to get the goods in the marketplace? Not Coronation, not Brownstone Market, not Charles Gard Market, but in the big supermarkets. If we're serious about corruption, which is what MOCA is about, fund MOCA, give them the full staffing. Don't dilute their duties with some of these small things. Let them go after the kingfish. Because, trust me, I'm so happy, Mr. President, that we did establish in 1973 the Integrity of Members Committee, which has now merged into, with other legislation, into the Integrity Commission. The fact that 8 of us, and I said, I don't consider myself one, so you can reduce it from 8 to 4. In fact, the leader of the opposition has asked his 14 downstairs and the 8 of us up here and none of us is aware. But the IC, the Integrity Commission says, those who are being investigated know who they are. And we now know that in August last year, at least one parliamentarian got a letter that they were being investigated, that he was being investigated for illicit enrichment. We now know that. There's one on the government side. Where is the next 7? According to my side, it's not on this side. We need MOCA to go after illicit enrichment. We need MOCA to develop rules on unexplained wealth. And with that, Mr. President, I have made my comment on this legislation that the government has a majority scheduled to pass. What they don't have the courage to do is to come to the Parliament with legislation saying they want to remove from our laws the crime of illicit enrichment. They are cowards. They are hoping that some judge somewhere, someday, will say it's unconstitutional. When the government of Andrew Michael Holness has the majority to change the law on illicit enrichment. I dare you to bring such a legislation here and avoid the cowardly route of trying to get a constitutional action in the courts. The reality, Mr. President, is that this government is not supportive of MOCA. What they're doing is to dilute MOCA. And let me just close by saying this. Minister, you're right. Relative to crime last year, it's down. But it's still higher than when Peter Bunting was the Minister of National Security. May it please you, Mr. President, let the cowards bring the illicit enrichment amendment here to move that from the Act. Let them bring it here if they dare, because I am convinced they know that they cannot bring it here because the Jamaican people would punish them. They are cowards. And so I leave the floor for Mr. Fitzhenley to come and curse.
Right. All right. All right, thank you, Senator Lambert-Brown. Senator Abka Fitzhenley.
Thank you, sir. I stand here in support of the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Amendment of the First Schedule Order 2024. I note that, as our Senate leader enumerated, the Act seeks to increase the list of offenses which fall under MOCA by amending the first schedule. I believe it is good that the amendments allow the Act to contemplate as sanctionable additional offenses which touch and concern a number of key sectors in Jamaica, including the fisheries sector, which, mind you, contributed about $30 billion to the country's gross domestic product last year. So I digress from Senator Brown in suggesting that the amendments will seek to treat with minor offenses or sectors which do not contribute much to the general output of the Jamaican economy. The fisheries sector contributed $30 billion to GDP last year. And if my memory serves me correctly, in 2022, the fisheries sector grew by approximately 16% when compared to the former year. Section 89 speaks to offenses involving prohibited fishing methods. 92 addresses the offense of stealing from traps, and 94 alludes to the offense of fishing in a fish sanctuary habitat, a development which I'm sure our just departed former Senator Samuda has taken a keen interest in, because it speaks to the protection of the environment. I believe fine-tuning the MOCA Act to allow the agency to clamp down on these crimes which affect important sectors in our country is a good development. Indeed, draft legislation such as the one before us here today, which seeks to enhance the good functioning of key sectors, can only augur well for our country by way of protecting the interests of legitimate participants in the industry from activities which are minded to offend Jamaican law. I hear Senator Brown suggesting that there's an attempt by the administration or members on this side to use the court of law to strike down the illicit enrichment law. That, sir, is absolutely false. As a lawmaker, I'd expect the Senate to appreciate that if a litigant intends to strike down a law, the Attorney General would be named as a defendant in whatever action is carried. So this notion that there's an attempt by members of this side to strike down the illicit enrichment law and there may be some intention to carry legislation to the Parliament to achieve that is absolutely false. It is not true. Indeed, the Senator misled the Parliament in that regard. I will agree with Senator Brown that MOCA, as part of its core mandate, when it was passed in 2018, it was mandated to target major organized criminal networks. Indeed, it has been so doing. So the fact that there are additional offenses that MOCA has within its disposal to pursue criminal activity does not detract from the point that the organization is at liberty to pursue even more major investigations of organized criminal networks. I agree with Senator Brown that corruption is a matter that has often reared its ugly head in Jamaican politics. And I can say that the record of the administration of Prime Minister Andrew Holness is strong in passing legislation to advance the anti-corruption fight, including making MOCA an autonomous agency in 2018. We passed the Integrity Commission Act. And any matter where corruption has arisen, the Prime Minister has taken swift and appropriate action. This compares with former years of the PNP administration, where you would have scandal after scandal after scandal. Some ministers then donning the moniker of Teflon Don, and not one sanction was meted out to by the then leadership of the PNP administration. So I believe it's a semblance of hypocrisy for the senator to seek to suggest that there's no accountability whereas the corruption fight is concerned and actions taken by this administration. Our record in fighting corruption is strong. And I say that without apology. Earlier, I had intimated that I can concur with Senator Brown that there are instances where the matter of corruption has arisen in the political arena. I recall a headline as well in August 2016, 5 fingered as PNP money scandal worsens. I recall that headline. And the article says, accusing fingers are being pointed at senior members of the PNP who are believed to have collected campaign donations and not turned them over to the party in the lead up to the next general election, to the last election. The article published incidentally by the Gleaner said, a document from the then PNP Treasurer Norman Horn was supplied to the PNP's NEC meeting in July, claimed that the action of some members with campaign donations was a major problem for the PNP. Yes, the Gleaner published this article. And the article went on to quote the then erstwhile PNP treasurer as saying, these persons were actively in the market for what seemed to be the sole benefit of their personal campaigns, and they collected significant amounts from members of the private sector, which were earmarked for the Treasury as potential substantial donors for the benefit of the PNP as one cohesive unit. But they kept the donations for themselves. Yes?
Corrupt organization, isn't it?
The article went on, Senator Brown, to say, according to party insiders, in one instance, a foreign entity contributed US 20 million to the PNP. US 20 million. But this was collected by a high-ranking PNP official and not turned over to the party treasury. Senator Brown speaks of major alleged criminality in the politics, and he called for MOCA to pursue certain investigations. I believe this matter would be ripe for an investigation by the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency. I strongly believe so, sir. As a matter of fact, another article germane to this matter indicated that the Office of the Contractor General had launched a probe into what was then described as the PNP campaign fund scandal. Yes? The Office of the Contractor General has launched an investigation into the misappropriation of campaign fund scandal that's gripping the opposition PNP. That's what another publication dated September 2016 indicated. Yes, when you hear the senator speak, you would believe these things did not transpire. And note that the Office of the Contractor General was subsumed into among the agencies subsumed into the Integrity Commission. It would be good for the Commission, upon the conclusion of the investigation into the PNP campaign funds scandal, to follow due process and cause the findings to be tabled in the Parliament. I look forward to hearing the outcomes of that investigation, if in fact it was pursued by the Integrity Commission after the law was passed, which subsumed the Office of the Contractor General into that single anti-corruption agency. So the fact of the matter is, I am hopeful that the amendments which we pursue today will allow MOCA to further and better pursue its mandate, which is to identify and target major organized criminal networks. I want to commend the organization as well for making some headway. Our Senate leader mentioned the investigation into the Manchester Parish Council scandal, where approximately $40 million was pilfered from the coffers of the entity. The Manchester Parish Council, which is controlled by the opposition PNP. But I know Senator Brown didn't include that. I think it would be in good order to commend MOCA for a successful investigation into that matter that led to conviction sentences being handed down.
Not a word, Mr. President.
Not Yeah, absolutely. $400 million of taxpayers' money was pilfered from the Manchester Municipal Corporation, controlled by the opposition PNP then. And a convictions and sentences were achieved by the Jamaican state. MOCA participated heavily in that investigation. I want to strongly commend MOCA for that. I encourage more of the same, and I'm sure you join me in so doing, Senator Brown. I believe, by way of passage in 2018 of the MOCA Act, which made MOCA independent of the JCF, that was a step in the right direction and not inconsistent with what transpires in jurisdictions not concerned with Jamaica, where various law enforcement agencies have their own mandate in tackling corruption. Before I resume my seat, I wish to just make a quick point. I note that Section 46 of the Act states inter alia that the Act should be reviewed from time to time by a committee of Parliament. I don't believe such a review has taken place as yet. I therefore support the notion that after 6 years from its passage, the time might be opposite to take another look at the MOCA Act and to make amendments where necessary to make the agency more effective. I'd suggest that. And I know that there are Jamaicans who might be impatient with the outcomes being generated by law enforcement agencies, including MOCA. However, I'd say though that sentiment is understandable, it's a fact that often investigations take time. But what I do is encourage the agency to continue pursuing the anti-corruption fight with vigor. And I'm confident that even after the passage of 6 years, that with a fluctuation of time, Senator Brown, MOCA will continue to bring outcomes that we desire. That is the systematic and effective targeting of major players in corruption, preparing airtight cases, carrying those individuals before the court, and ensuring that justice is done. In closing, I reiterate my support for the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency amendment of the first Schedule Order 2024. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Fitzhenley. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I think the first point that I wish to make in answer to Senator Brown's, one of his earliest...
So just before you start, because I suspect you're going to go. So if you can just do the 120, and then you can just go through without an interruption.
I'm guided, Mr. President. Mr. President, might the Senate be permitted to sit beyond 2 o'clock to complete the business of the day?
The question has been...
Beyond 1:30, sorry. 1:30.
The question is before the Senate. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, the first point I believe he made was that the addition of these offenses are diluting the powers of the MOCA. And I want to roundly and soundly reject that suggestion. What is being done here is the exact opposite. It is literally the exact opposite. It is strengthening the ability of MOCA to catch the big fish. If it is that the senator understood law enforcement and understood investigations, despite the chest with which he spoke, to use a young people's phraseology, he would understand that in these complex organized crime matters, it is usually the earliest, the smallest offense, the easiest proved offense which allows you the time to complete the investigation on the wider networking and the deeper connections to the big fish. What is critical, therefore, is that we ensure not that we say what we think should be in the bill, but that we listen to MOCA, which has said to the policymakers, these are the things, these are the gaps in our enforcement ability, these are the gaps in our investigation capacity that prevent us from sometimes completing a circle that is within our reach, but we're just not quite able to get there. These offenses most repeatedly occur within the context of our remit, and we need them, therefore, to be included in the Act so that we can ensure that we are being as effective as possible. And sometimes an offense may even look small, but it is a part of the income stream of a wider networked gang. Senator Fitzhenry mentioned that fishing earned the government revenue $30 billion last year. And that's legal fishing. The illegal and unreported fishing that takes place, the incursions into our waters, is another billion-dollar industry that we must be able to take hold of as well. So to think that it is about a little fisherman being on the sea without his license absolutely misses the point of the work that is before us. And it also misses the point that there are many people who hold themselves out as fishermen and fisherwomen, but what is in their boat at night time has nothing that is able to swim. I want to tell you that it is a blind and naive perspective that takes a view that what is happening in transnational crime, the trafficking of guns and drugs on our waters, is something that MOCA should not be concerned with. MOCA is not concerned with the man who was prosecuted for Aki. And I was among all of the people everyone who said, why on earth was this matter brought before the court? Why was a choice made for this gentleman to be charged for Aki? I mean, it's just one of the outrageous circumstances in our system that where things like this, the court's time is taken up with offenses like that. However, the ability of MOCA to prosecute in circumstances, and they are delineated in the Act and in the section that has been put before us, that they must be deemed to be serious. They must occur in circumstances where there is a connection with organized crime or that they have an international nature. So the definition of the crime does not necessarily mean that it will be, the fact that it is called simple larceny doesn't mean that it will be a language on the normal understanding of the word simple larceny. And it may be a cog in a massive wheel of a billion-dollar crime network. So it is very important to arm them in the way they have asked to be armed, not because we have some baseless concept of what we think they should be doing. On the matter of staffing and resources, MOCA does not lack for resources. MOCA has a challenge in recruiting the quality and not only the quality of personnel which they require and which they have on staff. They have a staff of which we can all be very proud as a country. Regrettably, it is often poached by recruiters from other countries, but also they have a rigorous vetting process, and it takes them quite a while. Should they be looking back at their salary scales? Maybe that is something that should be put on the table, if that might help. But the vetting and the competition for talent in other areas which also deal with high security now is actually very high. So they're at about, as I think rightly said, about 60% of their establishment. But it is not because the government has not given them the resources that they need. It is that there is a competition for talent in that space, which is very difficult to meet. So it's not a matter of the government not giving the budget that is requested or required. We have done that. And if there is a review that is needed, it will be done, and requested, it will be done as well. On the matter of the unexplained wealth orders, this is a matter which has been in discussion for some time. And it is a constitutional issue. It's not a light one. And quite a bit of work has been and is being done on it. There are, and the government is, of course, aware of these cases that have been quoted by the learned, aspiring QC, KC, or whatever it is you may be seeking. I know you don't like the KC term, but there are many legal minds that have been trying to work at this issue to balance the public interest versus the right to privacy, to ensure that it is not unduly wide, it's not disproportionately wide, and it's not arbitrarily exercised, so that it can fit within our Constitution. We do take note of the circumstances which have existed elsewhere. And even in the UK, where they don't have a written constitution, and they had to be delicate, there are very few prosecutions that have taken place under it because it is such a difficult thing to enforce. So we recognize we have a consultant that is working on the matter. Our Attorney General's chambers is seized with the matter, legal reform, etc. And the effort is to ensure that there's a mechanism that sits within the framework of our Constitution, that is proportional and not arbitrary. But it is a fact that we have been using the tools that are available to us, and there are significant successes that have been gained in this regard. MOCA has been able to through its investigations, has been able to secure forfeited assets in respect of real property valued at, what is this? More than, I'm sure I'm not counting these zeros correctly, but it would seem to me, let me just say billions of dollars. Let me say billions of US and Jamaican dollars. I mean, they forfeited bank accounts amounting to more than $282 million, $486 million, $154, $1 billion worth of real property. Listen, if I were to go through, let's not even count the vehicles, cash and investments. These are from, there are overlapping, because within the cases you may have 30 vehicles within one case. You may have 10 bank accounts within another. Exactly. So MOCA is focused on its work. MOCA does not major in the minor. MOCA does not try to create the perceptions of something being done wrong if there is nothing being done wrong. There is nothing in this world that is illegal or unlawful about having multiple transactions. Anybody who does business or even operates, even in a personal capacity, if someone is a hardworking, growing person who is seeking to grow their wealth and who is seeking to do better for themselves and their family, is going to have bank transactions. But POCA and KYC requirements create the flags where those are, where there's something improper, and where there's nothing about them in and of themselves that is improper. And to create this impression is really does such a disservice to law enforcement and investigation and the very complex area of financial crime. It confuses issues which don't need to be confused and politicizes issues which shouldn't be. And the day we learn in this country not to politicize what shouldn't be politicized, so that we can allow young institutions to grow and do what they should be doing properly, we will be a far better off country. Because it is this government which passed the Integrity Commission Act. It is this government which provided the budget for the Integrity Commission, the consultancies to set up the establishment. It is this government that ensured that there was a strong institutional framework to fight against corruption, expecting that it would be fair, expecting that the legal framework would protect persons from any weaponization of its tools. And that is a reasonable expectation of any Jamaican citizen, whether in the public or private sector. It is this administration which gave MOCA the budget to work in the way that it does. You are there talking about MOCA should tell us this and MOCA should tell us that. You know why MOCA works so effectively? Because they don't tell you nothing. They just do their work and make sure that their investigations are airtight, their cases are well constructed, so that they can be taken before the court appropriately. You said it, I don't know how many times you said it. MOCA should tell us. You don't understand the matter of crime investigation or criminal investigation and prosecution. You don't understand it and therefore should not be speaking in the matter. You did, and you can ask Hansard. I don't need to because I took the note myself. Listen, I just want to close very quickly to say that the amendments before us have been sought by the institution which feels that these offenses will enable them to be more effective. And our job as legislators in making laws within this, in this honorable chamber is to ensure that where we are guided by expertise, we take steps to empower, as in the security field, that we take the steps that are necessary to give them the powers they need to achieve the results that we as a society need. And we want a crime-free society. We want the big fish to be caught. Sometimes the big fish need to start with a little hook. And we need to make sure that all of these are provided for by law. With that, Mr. President, I ask that the Senate approve the order that is before us.
Question is that the order before us be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
President, it is not intended to do any further business today, but I believe that Senator
There's an intervention
Longmore
by
may have an intervention.
Senator Dr. Sophia Longmore. Senator Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is that time of year again. Not the pink advocacy today, though that is always present in October. We will do that at another sitting. But this week, the country recognizes mental health awareness. And this year's theme is mental health in the workplace. And I think we can all recognize in our personal endeavors here in this space the great need for our mental wellness practices and exercises as we execute our various functions. But Mr. President, this great emphasis became quite apparent post the COVID-19 pandemic, when the workplace scenario had to be so very much adjusted for the execution of our functions. And what we're seeing now, coming out of that phase, is that hybrid situation where you have person-to-person and as well as online execution of our duties. But it still comes to the forefront, the need for self-care and the holistic care of self, ensuring that, you know, work is supposed to be where we execute our functions for our financial wellness primarily. But I think we want to also appreciate that our occupations does not have to be stressful. And in one or two little personal notes that I would say in this is, try to find occupations that engages your passion, because when you work at something that you're passionate about, it is no longer work, but actually engage in that aspect of yourself that seems to seek to establish self-actualization. So in terms of emphasizing the practices of workplace mental health, I also want to underscore another effort, just generally in terms of the stigma and discrimination that we know is usually associated with mental health care. And this is something that I personally championed when I was doing the consultancy with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, is to reframe and encourage the use of the terminology mental wellness. Mental wellness. It is a different concept and a different reception when you speak of mental wellness versus mental ill health, mental health issues, mental illness. It is that much more amenable for buy-in and for discussion when we speak about mental wellness in our workplaces. And so with that, Mr. President, I would encourage us to go out there and practice our wellness, not just at home, but in our workplaces and right here in our Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Longmore. Senator Janice Allen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and please permit me to speak from a seat definitely other than my own.
And I give you that permission. And I don't know who can take the photograph so we can circulate it in Montgomery, right?
I'll be here, sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to make my own, in support of this important week and recognition of mental health, and I will adopt the terminology mental wellness. And especially in the workplace, a workplace that has, you say we must take on work that brings us joy and all of that, that will not feel like work. I have done so in recent weeks, and I'm really enjoying it. And in the workplace that I've become quite familiar with, the streets of St. James Central, I have had the honor of interacting, Mr. President, with people who, in various ways, we are called upon to serve because they are experiencing so many things that have caused them, impacted their mental health. Whether it is, and some would say it's probably weird but true, just issues like even climate change and how that impacts how people live and the concerns that they have to deal with on a regular basis. And the reality is that if we're speaking about mental wellness, the fact that many of our communities do not have spaces for people to be able, as Senator Longmore will often say, to play, whether the young or the old. And so that is one of the things that we must focus on in order to provide the space, the recreational space for people in their communities to be able to practice mental wellness and to relieve themselves of certain stresses. Last year, I believe, or maybe the year before, I did speak in support of this week, and it is an honor again to do so, because we must, in everything that we do, the regular acknowledgement of how our people are being impacted, whether in schools, in the home, in the workplace. It's certainly our job to do all we can to alleviate those concerns and issues that cause them. I mean, just this week alone, we have seen in the newspaper reports of incarcerated persons who with mental health issues. And these things bring to the fore the urgency with which we must act in order to address these unfortunate circumstances. We've seen a statement just yesterday, I believe, from the Integrity Commission, which speaks to corruption and mental health. And it was quite a shocking correlation for me to have read, but it's useful to pay attention to these things. The fact is, many people deal with mental health issues on a daily basis. They do what they can to survive. They do what they can to face each day. And it is important that whatever we do, we take it seriously because it does have long-lasting impact. And so I certainly support any effort that will create the opportunity for people to access what the services that are important for them to access in order that they can be better and be able to function in the tough climate, tough situations that they have to deal with on a regular basis. So I advocate for, along with you, my colleague, the need for recreational spaces for people, and certainly a willingness and a delicacy on our part in handling and making people feel safe, even with whatever issues they may have. We should make it safe for them to be able to reach out for help and also receive it. So, Mr. President, with those few words, I will head back to a city I'm so familiar with. And thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator. Oh, wow. Yes, how could I? Senator Ransford Braham.
Can I have your permission to speak from
You,
a rather higher place?
Yes. Yes.
No, thank you. Mr. President, this is a matter that I have been taking great interest in of late, because, of course, as some may know, it is also very personal to me. Not that I have been afflicted just yet, but I do have close family members who have had the issue. No.
No, him in a case by himself. He's a case by himself.
He's on the battlefield trying to help. But that have suffered in this area and suffered in extreme ways, and which required intervention from the state in both in the medical and otherwise. But it did, and out of that experience, I have been discovering a lot of persons who would advise me that, oh, my son, usually the males it seems, there are some females, but those persons who I've been speaking to is usually the males. And then you hear that my son, my nephew, and the problems that they're having. And then it is made worse, it seems, by the fact that most of these households are headed by women. And they have great challenges, Mr. President, in handling their male. Some of them become quite violent. Some of them are not even their sons. It could be their spouses, their partners, and so on, that are given trouble. And of course, mixed up with that is drug use. I know the love of ganja in this society, and I don't share the love that many do, because I believe it is a significant contributor to the problem. And I'm saying that without hesitation. And so I will end by saying I support the weak. I am asking, though, that we look as a society in how you can help more with those persons who find themselves in this situation and don't know what to do. Sometimes the resort is to the Obia man. It sounds a little funny, but it is true. People still resort to the Obia man to try and help. And sometimes when things get out of control, they often call the police. And the police methods are not often suitable. So if we can do something where we can publicize the citizenship, where they can go, somebody will come to help them, to take the person, because not everybody have 5 or 6 male relatives to come to help them. You know, in my case, I had several male relatives that I could stand aside and watch them take charge. But many of these women that have their male counterparts who are having challenges don't have that support. And so we need an expanded state support, unfortunately, where the people can take up the phone and say, John is now speaking to himself excessively. John is doing X and Y. He's mashing up he's mashing up the furniture in the house. He's threatening so and so. And so that they could send an appropriate team to help. And I think that that program, it is in existence to an extent, but it needs to be expanded and greatly publicized, because the problem is far worse than we think. And we don't realize it until it takes away. And so I support the week and I support the aims, but I ask us to look carefully at that further support for citizens who are dealing with extreme cases. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Brian. Minister?
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business. Might the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against, the ayes have it. This Senate is now adjourned.